Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and today we're going to be talking about what I think are the top 10 quote-unquote Stonewall bosses in Wiz. And by Stonewall, I mean that these are bosses that a solo player, that's obviously, not on the death school because there's different criteria for that, but these are bosses that a solo player should not reasonably be expected to beat. And another criteria I have for a boss to end up here is that the boss has to be encountered along the main storyline. In other words, stonewalling a player's progress through the game. I understand this is an MMO where teamwork is strongly encouraged, but if we're being real, if you take a character from 1 to 170, you're not seeing too many other people past the first few worlds. I mean, let's just be honest, it gets pretty desolate after Dragonspire. And so, quest and buddies are few and far between, and even if you do find one, some of these fights done at the appropriate level can still stonewall you. As of late, starting in 2022, the devs have started to add standard modes to numerous bosses like the Storm Titan's Trident, which, stonewall me, even with a team for about 6 months after release. That was back when you, absolutely needed bad juju in order to win that. And there was also Hall of Heroes, which was only ever soloed by Faeriequeens and Death Wizard, and quite famously at that. And then in later releases, things like Novus's Doom Moon fights right when they came out. As well as, some side quest bosses like Crash the Bandicoot also got some standard and challenge modes. But standard mode is definitely meant to be more friendly to people going for farming and just progressing through the game in the mainline boss's case, whereas challenge mode is done just for fun and to farm some stuff. So there's that to think about as well. Standard mode has been a huge success in cutting down on these stonewall fights, and look, I promised you though, there are still many out there, and many of them probably aren't even on this list. There's a lot that I'm overlooking, and I based these entries off of who has given me the most trouble in my on a budget walkthrough that I've been streaming and uploading frequently for over a year now. It's actually coming to a close relatively soon. There's only 3 more episodes left per my current plan, and there's been so many thus far. But I've also just got some extra general knowledge from having, done 7 other maxes with Daphne Blue being my 8th. So my walkthrough character is a little over halfway through Walaroo and has been rapidly approaching the end of the game. And just a quick spoiler, and this is honestly quite worrying for the future of the game's content. I'm a little scared to see what they're going to do in Arc 5 starting this fall. But 8 of these 10 entries are from the 4th arc. I enjoy a challenge, but that's what challenge mode should be for, yes? Alright, let's get into the 10 entries. Coming in at number 10, we've got the Rogue Engineer, and this is really just a stand-in for all of the Arc 4 bosses you'll see with hand-clogging mechanics. And honestly, after Revive Chates, these are easily my least favorite fights, with this being my second least favorite mechanic, because it completely tosses good deck building skills out the window. Deck clutter is already an issue in this game. I hate to generalize, but if you're playing the game with a full deck of cards, you are playing suboptimally. That's fine, play the game how you want, but in fights like these, the issue of not pulling what you need and letting precious time slip away, especially in an arc like the 4th one, where everything's hitting like a bullet train, they make the game infinitely less fun. Hand-clogging mechanics effectively emulate that feeling of playing without being able to pull what you need from your deck, and between this boss, the Zhang and Novus, the top entry on this list, and every other boss with the same mechanic, this is about the least amount of fun you'll have on Wiz. I just use the Rogue Engineer here because she's more annoying than some of the others with her shield cheat and massive amount of outgoing damage, plus her 2 minions. And, if you don't pack too many cards and get a good starting hand, typically you're good in these fights, which is why this is at the bottom of the list, but you're at the mercy of RNG even more than usual, which is why it gets here at all. Taking 9th place is going to be Cravenly and Ghost Dog in the Galleries of Chrysalis. While you face these bosses earlier on in Chrysalis, and to be quite honest, they merit honorable mentions just on their own, especially with the time that you're going against them, like pre-Darkmoor. Their combined fight in the galleries is nothing short of painful. More health, the same summon minions, the same overtimes every single round, the same Spirit Blast cheat if you can't kill Cravenly, the same 2800 Shadow Poison the Ghost Dog detonates after a few rounds. Yeah. I honestly can't even remember how I soloed this one. If memory serves, I went out of my way to level up my crafting so I could craft a ring that gave me 17 extra life resist to help tank Cravenly's dots, and eventually be able to buff up to do the damage I needed to do. This fight is insane, and I could have put Morganth herself here, but these two will rush you down, whereas with Morganth you can tank a little. Coming in 8th place, we have Judge Veg for being a literal Stonewall boss if you're soloing, because you can't, because he's bugged. And even if he wasn't bugged, he'd honestly probably still be here, just on the principle of it being a polymorph fight. On the first round, Judge Veg is supposed to polymorph you into, like, one of a few forms, I guess, and what's supposed to happen is you spend a few rounds in that polymorph form, you know, unable to access your main deck, and then what he does is he will eventually cheat cast a Lamassu at you to, you know, fully, like, you take full damage from that, because you don't have stats in these polymorph forms either, so you're taking full damage from that Lamassu, and what happens then is, what's supposed to happen rather, is then he'll unpolymorph you after you've taken a big hit. The problem is, he doesn't do that right now. So, yeah, he's bugged. But even if he wasn't, he'd probably still make this list just because the idea of a polymorph fight just sucks. So, yeah, he'll get here, bugged or not. Taking 7th place is Grandfather Spider, and this one took me so long to solo. With some of the others, I could just use a supercharge that my pet gives me, and y'all saw that in action in the Cravenly and Ghost Dog fight clip. But that is far from the case here, since he takes all your blades after a set amount of turns, and if you use that supercharge too late, you won't get to use it, and then he might even just, you know, say you have bad enough luck, and turn it right back around on you and use a Nested Fury, dealing all your health. So that's fun too. But you can kind of make use of it if you have Dark Surge, but it's still pretty risky business. You've also got to deal with the Shadow Sentinel minion, but once that's out, it's relatively formulaic. You just got to get a bunch of super buffed hits out and try to survive. Sitting under Brace helps a ton with that if you're a resist school, but if you're a damage school that doesn't have as great survivability, yeah, I don't know how you're going to solo this one. Sorry, team. Coming in 6th place is going to be the Oogie Boogies in King Gobsmack's Castle in Caramel, and this is just if you don't know the tech. So these are the ones where you can't just kill all 4 of them on the same turn like you could with everything else. There's 2 waves to this fight, and the ones from the first wave will deal 25% of your health upon death. So yeah, basically what that means is, if you kill 1 minion, it'll do 25%. And if you kill 2 minions, it'll do 25% times 2. So half your health is gone at that point. And this is your max health, by the way. So you're probably going to be taking hits regularly anyway. So you get the point. If you kill all 4 of them on the same turn, you are dead. Plain and simple. So there's that. The tech here is, though, just go back to the gym from a few quests prior and just beat those, like, right inside the door, and then you can progress, but otherwise, these innocent-looking snot monsters are gonna hold you for a while. At least until you can get yourself a teammate or a life wizard who could put a guardian spirit on you. And even if you do have a teammate, like, it's still not great, because that's an AoE hit where when it does the 25%, so yeah, even with a team, this fight is kind of a tough one, but yeah, usually a life wizard is going to be who you want as a teammate in this fight. Number 5, this one actually gets 3 bosses into it because, you know, figures. The following Urks all get here for the same reason, from Walaroo of course. They're super annoying and restrictive for different reasons each. You have to solo them too, which poses a huge problem given these can actually stonewall you, even if you've got questing buddies. So, Desperation is here, the ice one, for being insanely tanky. There's no feints unless you want an extra 5k damage to do, and random 80 shields every round if you get him below half, and he'll Guardian Spirit actually if you get him below 25%. There's also Icy for you to worry about. But ultimately, some schools are going to be more prepared to deal with this arc than others, and, you know, it's something about the arcs, the solo fights in Walaroo, it really depends on your school as to how fun a time you're going to have. And against Desperation, I was able to just use a Scion of Ice, the Shield Gambit, and do my damage that way, but if I was on, like, I don't know, a fire, for example, I would not have that luxury at all. So, just something to keep in mind when you are fighting these arcs. So, yeah. Anyway, continuing on. Despair does not let you blade, and there's more or less no feints due to swap ward. There's also no shields. He V-plagues a lot, but if you empower, he gives himself a 100 blade. Every time he casts a spell at you, he gives himself a 45 blade. Just all around a very, very restrictive fight. And then Rage is also here to a degree. It just seems to, you know, permanently have 3+ buffs and is scalding you for mass every turn you're above 6 pips. And interestingly enough, there is actually a counter to this one, which is, you know, you just use a pacify of some sort on him, and he will put 3 fire dispels on him. But the problem is, if you're blading, he is making 3 moves on that turn that you're making 1. So even though he's putting 3 fire dispels on himself after you use pacify, he's gonna take them all off in the same turn. So yeah, both of you lost a total of 1 turn. Go crazy, go stupid, I guess. Coming in 4th, we have Morg the Merciless. And remember when I mentioned revive cheats? Yeah, well, here we go. Fortunately, it's not on Morg himself, but rather on one of his minions, who he then proceeds to load up with tower shields. He deserves this spot, though, because anytime anyone on his side uses a dot, he'll detonate it. If you had a moment to breathe, the fight wouldn't be that bad, but he can use an 8-pip blast off at a moment's notice and instantly detonate it for, you know, north of 3,000 damage, which can be a run-ender. This was even happening to me while I had a brace-up on an ice wizard. Anyway, his minions also hit relatively hard, and they've also got, you know, stun spells, beguiles, mana burns, mantles, the works. There's also a cheat in there where, you know, one of his minions will use a Power Nova and it'll steal a pip and give a pip to Morg's whole team, which is also kind of goofy. But yeah, all in all, the poor design in this fight comes down to Morg forcing a long game with his revive and tower cheats when the wizard team cannot afford that due to Morg's sheer amount of damage output every round. It easily deserves this spot, and it's honestly not even the last one from its world, if you can believe that. Taking the bronze is the Arcane Toad, specifically the double boss fight in Wabagon territory in the Bunyip Warrens, where you are getting pelted non-stop, and you also have to take an extra turn to pixie or mend or something like that in order to not have the barrage continue at the end of every turn. This fight is complete horror. I don't know how else to describe it. Every 4 rounds, you've got to pixie or mend to make sure you aren't taking even more extra damage, which slows you down significantly. And the whole time, you know, they're weaknessing you, removing your blades with Leviathan and Disarm, and constantly raining down 4-figure hits more or less every turn. They've even got a Steel Pip Shift spell, which is crazy to think about. And they can also beguile on a bad turn for you, that sort of thing. And this fight needs to get looked at without a doubt. And I hope there's a standard mode made of it soon, because I have absolutely no clue how I'm going to solo it. Like, and I didn't. I wrote this script before I soloed it, or tried to solo it, in my budget walk. And I'll tell you how that went. It went poorly. I actually had a strat set up for it, but I died way too quick before I could even really carry it out. I am in ice, sitting under 25% stabilize, and like that's like 85 or more resist with what I had on at the time, and I was dying too quick before I could even use my main cards and all that. So fun. Very cool. And honestly, with how the season has gone, with, you know, Arc 4 being so tragic to fight, I decided not to solo it in the end. I even said on stream I would give it 1 shot with the strategy that I had come up with before I brought in my own Max Storm. So yeah, you know how that went. And, you know, Faerieque actually stopped his death budget walkthrough, I think, after Lemuria. So I don't know if he'd ever think about tackling Walaroo, but if I personally wouldn't if I was him, that's all I'm gonna say. Getting the silver medal is Moth-Amon from Lemuria, and I think we're all very fortunate that what has become my third least favorite mechanic has not seen a repeat in any form since this boss. So here's what happens. On round 1, Moth-Amon will summon 3 minions that you have to deal with somehow without blading, because he'll enfeeble you with a cheat, all while he's spamming shields and weaknesses. At the very least, you have Mandar as a free summon at your side, so he can kind of tank if you need it, but as is the case with all summon minions, he is unreliable and cannot be counted on to put in any real effort to kill the minions. The reason Moth-Amon gets all the way to number 2, though, is because you cannot target him when he has minions out. Literally cannot. AoEs skip him, cards like Mass Feint skip him, he's basically just not in the fight until his minions die, and, you know, of course that doesn't stop him from wailing on you with Weavers, Kismas, Freeze Rays, even the occasional Winter Moon, just because whiz. And, look, it's one thing to not be able to kill a boss until their minions are dead. It's another to physically stop the player from dealing damage to the boss, or even at the very least getting themselves into a position to where they can throw a 1-2 combo to end the fight. The schools that can survive Moth-Amon's onslaught of hits when his minions are alive oftentimes aren't strong enough to kill said minions, given blades aren't allowed, right? And the schools that can kill the minions without blading cannot survive multiple buffed 8-pip freeze rays. So there's that. Some quick honorable mentions to go over is going to be Copycat and Quake Charmer in Novus, Enki the Heretic and the Prophet in Selenopolis, Krokotopia, Belloc in Twin Giants Azteca, the Deep Spawn in the Starfall Sea and Chrysalis, Cravenly and Ghost Dog separate fights also in Chrysalis as I mentioned before, and Ponce de Gabon in Azteca just due to gear being outdated. And now it's time for number 1. The aberrant paradox, literally Dasein himself, has to top the list given it takes 2 Max Storms, helping a 140 to win the fight with the damage output and handclog mechanics. You heard that right, handclog mechanics are back in force. I'll say this part of the beginning rather than the end for once, this boss hits like a 500-pound brick to the nose, and so do his minions. Anyway, back to the handclogging thing. He'll change the bubble every few rounds, and when he does, he'll give you a harmful card to use on your team that you can't discard. Said bubble also buffs the school it looks like while nerfing the outgoing damage of its opposite, so if you get a purple bubble and you're a myth, well, don't hit for another few rounds. The main deal here is he has 3 waves of minions, all of which need to be defeated before he himself can die, and it's a good chance he'll die at least once while you kill the minions, meaning he'll revive with half his health and all 70 percentage points of his resist to every school, so you can't just, breathe on him at the very end. So, you need a strong enough hit to kill 3 elemental minions, then 3 spiritual minions, and then 2 balance minions and 1 shadow minion. No matter how you cut it, your school is getting resisted by at least one of them, so you'll need an extra buff for whenever that is. This, like the Morg fight, would be totally fine if you had the time to spare in this fight, but like I said at the beginning, not only does the Paradox himself hurt, but his minions do too, and they've got a wide array of stunning and debuffing spells that they use liberally. You're easily spending north of 10 rounds in this fight no matter what, just due to the 3 waves of minions, and let me tell you, even if you're a max wizard, you do not have that kind of time. On both my balance questing streams and on my budget walk streams for that episode, it took 2 max storms coming to help me to get past this boss. I can easily say that this is the hardest mainline boss in the game solely because it's an uphill battle even with multiple maxes helping you. Oh, and forget trying to flee and come back if you die. That's something I never really touched on for this whole video because I never thought it'd be important, but here it absolutely is because he'll just delete your health bar if you come in late. Nothing else to it. Just a Terry on top for this fight that presses even, full teams of 4. If you really think about it, this has my top 3 least favorite fight mechanics. It has a revive cheat if you kill the boss prematurely, a cheat cycle that clogs up your hand, and the inability to focus on the boss at any point in the fight. Just lovely. When are we getting standard mode for this, KingsIsle? Well, as you can no doubt tell, there's no shortage of Stonewall bosses on the Wizard101 main story quest line, And yeah, there's a lot that didn't make this list that, you know, reasonably could, I guess, if some of these got standard modes. Mr. Kane over in Billabong Resort over there is one that I think I might be able to put on there. We'll see how that fight goes in the next episode of Budget Walk, which I should be streaming today, provided plans don't change, which who knows. But yeah, those are 10, I guess technically 12 if you're counting the extra 2 arcs that I gave, as, you know, so yeah, the 12, wow, English is hard, 12 Stonewall bosses that I've just shown to y'all, and it is my genuine hope that KingsIsle decides to do something about these Stonewall bosses in a future update, or at least just provide a standard mode for them, just because, you know, questing through this game, especially, you know, 8 times like I have now, it's like, it can get kind of draining doing the double Arcane Toad fight for the 8th time, and it's like, yeah, it's just not a fun time. And just, I mean, I get that there's people that will say, oh, it's an MMO, you know, just get a team for it, but, I mean, have a gander. I'm going to stay in team up for the rest of this video. I mean, the outro's not going to be too terribly long, but nobody's going to join this. Mark my words. Hello? Anyone subscribe to Ice Gold? Question mark. All right. But yeah, you more or less get the idea that, yeah, I mean, ultimately KingsIsle just really needs to look at these bosses and either nerf them or make standard modes out of them. And, you know, for some of these bosses, they're not really dropping anything important. Like the Arcane Toad, for example, drops, I think there's a pet that, like a Phantasmanian imp, that I think gives a Stormblade and a Tempest item card, if my memory is correct on that, which is good for Storm Wizards who are just starting out the game, but ultimately it's an exclusive pet as well, so yeah, can't really hatch for it. But yeah, I mean, I do hope that KingsIsle does decide to make standard modes for a bunch of bosses. Like, just do a sweep, KingsIsle, like, please, for my sanity, man. And yeah, ultimately, that, I think, is going to wrap this one up. So, thank you all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. While the sky in Walaroo is beautiful, my Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more. And I will see y'all later.